اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين. Please recite another salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. We are all so blessed that another Muharram we've been given the honor of commemorating the martyrdom of Imam Hussain, and I'm very happy and blessed to be among you in your community this Muharram. It is truly an honor for me, and it is really amazing. It's inshallah tonight I will come back to this, why tonight and the other coming 10 nights are so special. But alhamdulillah, we should appreciate it, we should make the most out of it, and inshallah elevate and get closer to God. So tonight and the coming 10 nights, inshallah, we'll be talking about faith and different topics associated with it, as I think it's a very important issue for the world right now. We'll be talking about what faith actually means. When we say we're faithful, we're believers, what do we actually mean? We're talking about doubts, the period that we experience doubts in our faiths, in our beliefs. We'll talk about suffering and how to keep our faith strong through the times of suffering. We'll talk about so many things, but tonight would be, inshallah, in a way an introduction into the topic. And from tomorrow our serious discussion would start. Tonight I will just try to show why this topic is important and worthy of 10 nights of discussions. And I want to start with a personal story. You know, we all have something that reminds us of memories we had with certain people in our life. It could be a perfume, it could be a music, it could be a nasheed that we listened to in a road trip. And now as soon as we listen to it again, or as soon as we smell that perfume, immediately we're taken back to the memories we had with someone. It's as if we're living that moment again, like our whole subjective experience is taken back to the moment we had. And this, as powerful as it is, it's even stronger when that person is no longer alive. My grandfather used to have tasbih or subha in his hand all the time, and he had a specific taste. He would have the ones with thick beads. You know, I don't know if you've seen them or not. It has only 33 beads, and the beads are quite thick and large. And he would have one all the time. He would either say zikr, or even if he was talking to you, he was still, you know, like playing around with it. And I loved it so much, and he knew this, and he got one for me. And I lost that one, and then he bought another one for me, and this went on for a while. He would keep buying this for me, and then I would lose it, and then he would buy another one for me. And so ever since he passed away, which has been quite, I think, 8 or 9 years now, as soon as I see one of these tasbihs, quickly I'm reminded of him, instantly. It just happens in 1 second. And you know, the first few years after we lose a loved one, I'm sure it's happened to most of us. It's either grandfather, grandmother, for some of us it's parents. For the first few years after we lose a loved one, the images we have of them are very clear in our mind, right? For a while, we don't even notice they're gone. We don't want to accept it, right? It's like, especially if they lived in another city, if grandma was in another city, we try to pretend that they're still there. They haven't gone. It's just that if we're not going there. In summer comes, we go there, they will be there. But after a while, when we accept that they're no longer there, their images are still in our mind. Whenever we miss them, we can go back to the memories we had of them and then feel like they're there. But unfortunately, after a while, and I feel really guilty saying this, after a while, the image becomes blurry. I don't know if you've noticed this or not. You try to imagine them, the image is there, but it doesn't have the details it used to have. It's been a few years, it's been 5 or 6 years, and you can only remember a few of the memories you had with them. And you try really hard to bring back the details and to see it as clear as it was a few years ago, but it doesn't happen. The picture has lost some of the details. It's become blurry. It's still him, it's still my grandfather, but sometimes I doubt it, whether in this image he was wearing his white shirt or was it his blue shirt. So I have to go to the pictures I have of him. I have to go and see, and because I want to remember his face, you know, like, I'm sure you all do this. When you go to the shrine of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, or in Iran, if you go to the shrine of Imam Reza, you immediately remember those who've passed away and you want to pray for them. You want to pray 2 rakats for them on their behalf. And so, in Iran, in the shrine of Lady Ma'asuma, when I want to pray for my grandfather, I wanted to remember the details. So I went home one day and I asked my mother to give me the photos. I said, I want to see the photos, his photos, and remember all the details, because the picture in my head is fading. And I looked at the photo, and he was there sitting there on the sofa next to me. Suddenly all the details came back, right? And I felt for the first time like very, very lucky to have these pictures, because without them, those details would have been gone forever. But what really made me upset was that I was sitting next to him in that photo, but I couldn't remember anything. Like, my mind agreed that yes, this is me, but I had no recollection of that memory. You know, it didn't feel real. He was there, but I didn't remember being like sitting next to him. So in a way, I had those details, but it didn't feel real. Now the reason I'm talking about this is that something similar has happened to our connection with God. Before, God used to be the center of people's lives. Everything was explained through God. But unfortunately, this is not the case anymore. In the modern world, God is not the center of people's lives. It could be for the religious, for a few, but it is not. It is no longer the same for all the people. God is no longer the center of man's life in the modern world. And the windows through which God would shine upon our life are now blurry. If our ancestors, if people a few hundred years ago looked at the nature and saw God, we no longer have that luxury. In a world where God held the birds in the sky, where the thunders could not be explained unless by the power of God, and people did not know the scientific explanation behind rainbows, and they thought it must be a work of God, nature was loaded with God's presence. People would look at anything and they would see the hand of God there. But unfortunately, what has happened is that today in the modern world, just because we have scientific explanation of many of the natural phenomena, we feel like God is no longer needed. It's as if for the modern man, science has explained God away. You know, please recite the salawat.
برای خشنود امام حسین علیه السلام بلند الصلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
A few hundred centuries ago, people felt living in the world, that they are living in a place and they are guests. And God is the host of this universe, and God is a caring and loving host. And every now and then this host would send messengers to remind people that He is there, that He loves them, that He cares about them, and that He's watching over them. But we no longer have these messengers. You know, it's interesting, if you look at the Quran is filled with examples of people having questions, going to the Prophet, and Prophet answering it for them from God. You see this so many times repeated, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ. And they ask you regarding wine and gambling. They ask you regarding the forbidden months. They ask you regarding the hereafter. So any question people had, they would go to the messenger of God and he would answer it for them. God would talk to human beings through messengers. But now, we don't have that anymore. We don't have anyone to go to directly when we have questions, to ask our questions. That luxury has been taken away from us. So no longer we can look at nature, and when I say we, I mean the people in the world. Of course, for many, it could be different. Still, we have people who look at nature and see God. But the common situation in the world I'm talking about, we can no longer look at nature and see God the way it was possible before. Now, they clearly explain rainbows as reflection and refractions of light. And it is not ironic that in a lecture on physics of rainbows, the lecturer, after explaining the science behind why rainbows happen and why the red is always on top and blue at the bottom, why if you look 10 degrees higher you would see the second rainbow. After explaining all of this, he showed a picture of a biblical painting from the 6th century. The picture painted by the religious. And over the rainbow, there's a hand, a symbol that this rainbow can have no other explanation other than that it was created by God. And he not only mocks this, that we don't need God to explain rainbows anymore because we can explain it quite well, he also points out that in the painting, blue is at the top, which is clearly wrong. So in a way, he's not just trying to substitute God with a scientific explanation, but is also mocking the religious, that even their attempt to explain natural phenomena with God, they got it wrong. Something as simple as the rainbow, all you had to do was to look up and see that red is always on top, blue can never be on top. So this was one of the ways that we had to see God in our life, to go beyond the universe that we lived in and see God and experience the presence of the divine. And now this window has become blurry. It's no longer as effective as it was. If you look at in the Quran, it says وَسَنُرِيَهُمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ, and we will show them our signs in the universe and in themselves so that they realize He is the truth. Now, as we said, universe or nature does not have that capacity anymore, or at least it doesn't have for many people. Man thinks that just because he can have these impressive explanation, that God's power is no longer behind this phenomena. What about وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ? God in the Quran says, our signs are not just in the universe, but they are within you too. Right? What about this way? What about this window of looking at God? But this one has not been immune from attacks either. Right? Before, we used to think that our dreams are a sign that there is more than the physical world. We used to think that sometimes we experience God in our heart. But then, Freudian psychology and other forms of psychology, they came into being and said, no, whatever you feel, your deepest inner experiences have human origin. And what example do they give? They give the example of the seashell. You must have all tried this, that as children, we would hold the seashell close to our ears and we thought we're hearing the ocean, the rush and the roar of the ocean. Whereas while all we were doing was we were just listening to the blood in our head, right? So he gives this example that in the same way that a kid holds a seashell next to his ear and thinks he's hearing the ocean, while all he or she is doing is listening to the rushing blood in his own head, the religious think that they're experiencing God, that their dream is a message from a world beyond the physical world, whereas all of this is not receiving any message, it's just invention. It's all imagination of the mind. So another window we had to go beyond this world, again, is obstructed by science. Of course, none of these attacks have been left unanswered, but still, they have made it very difficult for the man in the modern world to find a window to look at something and go beyond this physical world. Nature has been emptied from divine presence, and so has been our hearts. When our deepest inner experiences are explained as the creations of our own mind, where love is only the release of some hormones, where sympathy is only the natural disposition of our selfish genes, then there is not much place left to go in our heart and see God. Another place that we had, if you remember the story I told you about my grandfather, I said when the image of my grandfather was fading in my head, what I did was that I went to the pictures I had of him. So now that in a way the presence of God is fading in the world, or at least we fail to understand it, in the same way that I went to the photo, we can go to the scripture. But unfortunately, even the scripture interacting with the holy book is not as easy as it used to be. I told you before, any question man had, they would just go to the prophet, say, we have this prophet, give us the answer. If you read the Shan Nuzul of Surah Yusuf, it says that people went to the prophet and said, why don't you bring some stories for us? And then Surah Yusuf was revealed, which was the most beautiful story. وَنَحْنُ نَغُصُّ عَلَيْكَ أَحْسَنَ الْغَصَصِ. What is our situation compared to their situation? They had questions the Prophet answered. They wanted stories. A surah would be revealed, which was the best story, Surah Yusuf. But right now, all we have, of course we have this amazing book, but in the same way that the picture of my grandfather always shows him on the sofa, now the book we have is fixed. Of course, if we go and study it, if we go through it, we can take the answers we want that match the current situation we are in right now, but it's no longer as easy as it used to be. Before, for example, on the day of Mubahala, which was quite close to us, the groups came, they had questions, there was an argument, what do we do, what don't we do? Quran give the answer, do Mubahala. As easy as that. But now, as Muslim community, or as the community of the faithful, we're facing so many challenges. How do we live here in the problems we have? The ridicule that Islam and faith as a whole are experiencing, all of this. What is the responsibility of the Muslim society? What is the responsibility of the community? All these questions we have, serious questions if we really think about them. And the answer is somewhere hidden in that book. We no longer have someone to go to and get the answer directly. Now we may understand why in Dua Iftitah we say, Allahumma inna nashku ilayka faqd nabiyana. Oh God, we complain to you that our Prophet is no longer with us. These are difficult times. You know, some of the things that we are experiencing, in a way the Prophet experienced them too. That faith was being ridiculed, people denied his message. But throughout the Quran, you see God talking to the Prophet and telling him that he should not be upset and that it would be okay and that he should be patient. Right? There's so many of these verses, like Surah Ma'idah verse 41. God says, do not be upset. Don't let the ones who are rushing to leave the truth upset you. Right? Surah An'am verse 33. God says, I know that what they say is upsetting you. God is telling this to the Prophet. Right? I know what they say is upsetting you. But don't think they're telling that you're a liar. No, they're denying my message. By the way, look how beautiful this is. The way God is consoling the Prophet, saying, don't worry, they're not saying you're a liar. They're saying my message is not true. Right? How beautiful that is. God wants to make the Prophet feel better and says it's not you they're after, it's me. I think that's just wonderful. Right? Or in Surah Nahl, verse 127, God says, I know this is upsetting you. But wasbir, be patient. وَمَا صَبْرُكَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. Be patient, and this patience that you feel right now, that's from me. So that again is a sign of me. Now, we are in a way going through similar challenges currently, and we no longer have that direct communication from God to tell us that it's going to be okay. One of the most famous people of the faith in our time was Mother Teresa. She's famous for her faith, for all the great work she did in the name of religion, to spread love, to spread God's love, to be a symbol of God's love for all mankind. Now, I don't know if you've heard of this or not, but a few years ago, a book came out which was letters she had written to her seniors in her youth, in which she expresses the difficult time she's going through. Although outwardly, she was always showing courage, she was always showing strength, she always showed her great faith. But inside, when she's alone, she has so many dark hours. In one specific letter, she writes to her senior that the darkness is such that I really do not see. The place of God in my life is lacking. I long and long for God, but I can't see. The pain and the torture I can't explain. So even an individual whose faith is famous in the world went through periods in her life where she was struggling with her faith. And unfortunately, no longer God talks to us directly. We no longer have messengers to go to and say we have these problems. Imagine if we only received one sentence from God that said, I know that these are upsetting you, but it's going to be okay. I know the current situation is tough, but I will be there for you. We don't have that. We don't have a messenger. We don't wake up to the news of miracles. It's as if God's presence is very difficult to experience. Now, referring to this, one of the most famous theologians of our time refers to this as the eclipse of God. Now, I heard this first and I had mixed feelings about it. On one hand, it articulates the phenomenon very well. The eclipse of God. what does eclipse mean? In for example, a solar eclipse, the sun is not really going away. All that happens is that we can't see the sun. Something's blocking our vision. So he uses this metaphor to say that in the current world, it's not that God has gone anywhere. God is shining as bright as ever. But there are certain things on the way that stop us from seeing the light of God as bright as man could do a few centuries ago. So I like this term because it articulates the point very well, but at the same time I felt quite guilty. Is this right to say about God, the eclipse of God? Isn't this a bit rude? And then I was going through the hadiths of Prophet, and I saw the Prophet has a very, very similar term. When he's talking about Akhir al-Zaman, the Prophet said, the people with the most impressive faith, right? Please pay attention to each word. Like each word, I think, has been chosen carefully. It says, people with the most impressive faith and the worthiest convictions are people of the future times who have not met any messengers of God. And this bit is very interesting for me. فَحَجِبَتْ عَنْهُمُ الْحُجَّةِ, and the proofs of God have been veiled from them. Their faith is based on عَلَى سَوَادٍ عَلَى بَيَاضٍ. Their faith is based on written ink on white paper. They have not seen messengers. They are not living in a world where you can look at nature and see, oh, that is the power of God. It's not as easy. They have not seen the messengers of God, but still they have kept their faith. He says they have the most impressive faith. They are living in a time when you can leave your house in the morning as a faithful person, but return back to your house without faith. And then there's a line, it says, يَكُونُ حِيرَةً وَغِيبَةً. There will be perplexity, there will be confusion, and there will be absence of clarity. So clearly the Prophet saw the current situation that we're living in that time. These are not easy times. You know, these are not difficult. These are very difficult times. And for many of us, of course, you know, it's. I was watching this lecture on reality, and the guy was mentioning an example which I think applies to some religious people as well. He said people don't always live in the same world. Some people, and you can see, for example, with your grandmothers or aunts, I don't know. Some people, for example, they don't come along with the progresses in medicine, right? Like no matter what problem you have, they're like, yeah, have some ginger, put an egg, I don't know, like if your hair is not growing anymore, just put an egg on top of it, it's going to be okay. You know, like any problem you have, just drink this. They always have like something for you. Drink this, you'll be fine. Medicine has progressed so much, but they have not. They're still living in their own reality. Some people are like that in physics. They've not even updated to the physics of Newton, let alone relativity, let alone quantum physics. Right? So it's not like people are all living in the same time. Many people don't even understand the physics of Newton. Now I want to explain to them the quantum theory and the changes that brings. So in the same way, it's not that everyone right now is living in Akhir al-Zaman. If you are, for example, I don't know, a person who has so much kept to their culture, they're not really open to what's happening in the world, you could as well be living like our ancestors lived like 100 years ago. And I'm saying in the sense that they're not really feeling the attack. You know, they're not really feeling understanding the challenges that are being put out there. And often this causes so many problems because the parent, for example, who was brought up in a very traditional family, who never heard, for example, the lectures of Sam Harris or Richard Dawkins, whose faith was never questioned, never needed an argument to prove God's existence because God's existence was so obvious to them. Now this father sends his son or his daughter to a school with all schoolmates, classmates who are non-Muslims. The lectures of Richard Dawkins are online, his book is online, Sam Harris's lectures are all over the place, Christopher Hitchens' lectures are, their faith is being challenged seriously. But the father doesn't know, the father is at home. All the friends he talked about are the same friends from 10 years ago, from 20 years ago, from 13 years ago. He doesn't understand that keeping the faith for that child is really a challenge. So the child is living in Akhir al-Zaman, in a time where keeping your faith is harder than keeping fire on your hand. This is a hadith, but the father is living in the time before Akhir al-Zaman. And this is very important to realize, that not everyone's living in the same situation. You could be in the same house, live in different situations, different realities. So, as I said, we're living in difficult times like this, but there are silver linings. And the most important one of that is that people who keep their faith in such times are said by the Prophet to have the most impressive faith. The harder it is, the more valuable it is. Now, inshallah, in the coming nights, I will talk about why do we keep our faith, why it is rational to keep faith. We'll try to go through the attacks that faith has received and try to say that it's not like we can't answer them. We'll try to find ways that we can still go beyond this physical world. And I'll try to say why this is so important. We'll try to talk about what does faith actually mean. Is it only a sentence we say? Is it a feeling in your heart? When you say I'm faithful, what does it really mean? Can faith fluctuate? What to do when we have doubts? What to do when certain thing doesn't make sense to us in our tradition? And inshallah we'll talk about all of that in the coming nights. But tonight I want to just go back to the word eclipse. And using that, I want to mention, because as I said, so many of the windows we had to look at the presence of God are now blocked. But alhamdulillah, we are so blessed that one of them is as open as ever. And I want to go there using the word eclipse. I don't know if you saw it or not, but just exactly a month ago, on 21st of August, there was a total solar eclipse. I don't know if you watched it or not. I watched it very carefully, and I've seen the videos of it so many times. You know, during an eclipse, as the moon, a solar eclipse, as the moon comes down to block the sun, and this is midday, right? This is during the day. So the moon is coming down and is gradually blocking the sun. And if you look around, you'll see that your shadows become darker and darker. Your shadows become stronger, right? Your shadows that were a bit vague, weak, now become darker and stronger. And then as the moon comes lower and lower and completely blocks the sun, it becomes very dark, because there's not even moonlight, because the moon, all you can see of moon is a dark object. So it's middle of the day, but it's very dark. Now the most interesting thing, or one of the most interesting thing that happens during a solar eclipse, is that it's midday, but you can see the stars. The light of sun is blocked. Moon is seen as a dark object. The only light you see in the sky is the light of stars. And it's amazing to watch. You know, seeing the stars at night is amazing. Now imagine seeing stars during the day. So in the same way that when the light of sun is blocked, there are still stars in the sky that shine, even when most of the ways to see God have become very difficult to experience, to use. There are still stars, there are still ways to experience the shining light of God, and one of them is Imam Hussain. In a period where a lot of people are facing challenges with their faith, these 10 nights of Muharram are like a window that's open in a world that is trying really hard to put God aside, brings God back into our lives stronger than ever. And all these years, the power of Muharram has not been reduced. There is this verse in the Quran, and this link just happened in my mind today, and I was so amazed. There's this verse in the Quran talking about how people guided their ways and how ships would find their ways in the ocean using the stars. And there, in the Shan and Nuzul of this, one of the Imams says, these stars are us. In the same way that the sailors on ships would find their ways using the stars, we are the stars of guidance. And I was amazed that the link was made, that even the Imams themselves introduced themselves as the stars. So I want you to really understand the value of Imam Hussain. You know, we're living in a world, and you may have not noticed this. I said people live in different realities. If you've been debating, if you've been thinking, if you've been going through the arguments for the existence of God, for our beliefs, if you've been trying to find something to show to people, to say, hey, I'm going to point at this, and you can see this and know that this is not material for sure, it is very difficult to find. Before they would say love is, before they would say knowledge is, before they would say this is, that is. But right now it is very difficult. In a world like this, where it's so difficult to point at something and say this is definitely not material, the best argument for the existence of God is Imam Hussain. I'll explain why. It's not as simple as that. I said, when I missed my grandfather, there were pictures that I would go to. And in the life of Imam Hussain, there are these frames, there are these moments that when you look at it, it's as if a window opens and you can go beyond this world and see God. Many of us, when Muharram comes, we're all upset, we're all sad, and we mourn the tragedies. But for me, Muharram is not mourning the loss of a loved one. It's more than that. Muharram is mourning the absence of a champion, the absence of a person who stood on the ground but his soul went to the skies. And I want to talk about two frames tonight, two frames from the life of Imam Hussain that you can look at and know that there is definitely something more in this world. I'm not going to be talking about what they did to Imam Hussain, as horrible as it is. You know, in the Quran, there is this verse that says, يُرِيدُونَ لِيُطْفَئُوا نُورَ اللَّهِ بِأَفْوَاهِهِمْ. They want to stop and kill the light of God with their mouths, right? And I read that today, and for me, it had another meaning. Like, it said they want to stop the light of God with their mouths. And I kept reading, with their swords, with their spears, with their stones. But I don't want to talk about that. What I want to talk about is the night before Ashura. Imam Hussain is going around the tents You must have all heard this story. Imam Hussain is going around the tents and he's picking the thorns that are around there. Someone comes and says, what are you doing? Of course, the answer is quite obvious. Imam Hussain knew that tomorrow children would be running, children would be trying to escape. And he didn't want them to walk over these thorns. This is sad, this is tragic, this is heartbreaking. But this could only be the love of a father for his children. This doesn't shout God to me. This shouts heartbreaking. It shouts the love of a father. But what he says next, it goes beyond this. So he asks, why are you doing this? Imam Hussain says, tomorrow, when my children are escaping, when they're running over these thorns, I don't want the army of the enemy. The army of the enemy has already killed me by that time. So their soul has become darkened by that grave sin. I don't want more darkness to be added to their soul because of making my children run over these thorns. Now this is a moment you can look at and see God. He is worried for the enemy. He says their heart is already dark. They have committed one of the biggest sins, but I don't want them to commit more sins. I don't want the sin of making my children running over the thorns to be added to the letter of their deeds. Because every sin is disobeying God. And Imam Hussain doesn't want that. Now what can this be? Isn't this a sign that there is more to this world? Doesn't this make you feel proud? It's heartbreaking, but it's not just heartbreaking. This is why when some people say Muharram is all about mourning, I become angry. You've missed the point. We have someone like Imam Hussain that we should be proud of. When Muharram comes, we should be as proud as we have ever been. To have someone who is not only worried for his children, but is also worried for the soul of the enemy. The second frame, and I'll end with this, is Lady Zainab a few days after. Imam Hussain has been killed. Hazrat Abbas has been martyred. All the sufferings Lady Zainab has gone through. All the tragedies they've gone through. Now on the way going to Sham, Lady Zainab is doing her Salat al-Layl. And some narrations say that she can't stand up anymore, so she's doing it sitting. And in her qunut, she is praying for some of the people who attacked them. Someone drives in front of us in the highway, we get mad. Just that. But this lady, her brothers were martyred. Her family was treated like that. After all of this, she sits and is talking to her God. She's not complaining that, why did you do this to me? She's not cursing the enemy at that time. And she's actually praying for some of them, the ones that still have hope of guidance. So I think these frames, these few seconds from the life of Lady Zainab is the best window to look at and see that there is more to this world. I really pray and hope that inshallah God enables us to make the most out of these amazing, amazing nights in which I think there are so many ways to experience the presence of God. And may Allah enable us to make the most out of these nights. May Allah inshallah cure all the diseased. all the people who are going through diseases, all the ill people of the community. May Allah inshallah help all the Muslims, all the believers, all the people around the world who are going through difficult times. Muslims in Myanmar, Muslims in Yemen, all around the world, where our brothers and sisters are going through difficult times. It is impossible to be a person and not care, let alone being a Muslim and not care. May Allah inshallah solve all the problems of the community and of all the people of the world. Please recite the salawat.